All of the flavors just come together. That hint of cream cheese from the frosting with the pineapple, it's doing something that's like almost tropical, but totally tapered down by that lovely vanilla and almond flavors that like you expect from a cake. Hey everyone, I'm Valerie and welcome to my home kitchen. Today we're going to be making Granny's $1 million cake. This is a 3-layer cake with a pineapple filling. The recipe is from my cookbook, Life is What You Bake It. It's one of my favorites because it's the first cake I ever learned to bake. It is a cake that is just so crowd pleasing and so delicious. And this was all from the cake that my grandma Willie Mae taught me way back in 1990 something, way back when. So the first thing we're gonna do is make the filling. You need a large 20 or 21 ounce can of crushed pineapple and some granulated sugar. This is 1/4 cup. And when my grandma showed me how to make this cake, I remember the first thing she did, she put the pineapple filling in her blender. We're gonna use a food processor, but you can use a blender. And even though it's crushed, because we're putting it in between cake layers, we wanna make sure that it's nice and smooth. We want it to be the consistency of applesauce. It looks like applesauce or pineapple sauce. And I didn't realize it at the time because this is the filling for the cake, but it's also used as kind of like a soaking syrup for the cake layers. And I'm just gonna cook this until the sugar dissolves, which is gonna take about 5 minutes. And it will also help keep our pineapple filling nice and fresh if we don't eat the cake all in the first day. I like the way this is looking, so I turned off the heat and I'm gonna just set it aside. We're gonna make the cake layers for this cake. It's called a 1, 2, 3, 4 cake because the ratios are so easy to remember. This cake has 1 cup of butter, 2 cups of sugar, 3 cups of flour, and 4 eggs. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I added my own little moniker, so I called it ABC. So if you can remember 1, 2, 3, 4 ABC. And the A is for aromatics, B for baking powder, and C for 1 cup of milk. 1, 2, 3, 4 ABCs, S, salt. So to make it, the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to combine our dry ingredients. I've got baking powder, salt, and I'm just gonna whisk these together. And the reason we whisk our dry ingredients together when we're making a cake is because by the time we add them to the batter, we don't wanna overmix. And we don't want, like clumps of baking powder. Next, we're gonna cream our butter and sugar. You can do this with a wooden spoon, you can do it with a hand mixer, but I'm gonna use my stand mixer for this one. I'm adding my 1 cup of butter, which is 2 regular size sticks. And I'm gonna beat this on medium for about 30 seconds. I just want it to be really nice and smooth. So I'm gonna add the sugar in a steady stream. And the reason we like to do this when we're creaming butter and sugar, it allows it to incorporate better. And this actually plays a really important role in our cake rising and our cake being a good texture. We're gonna let that go for a few minutes. When we say we want it to be light and fluffy, the color will actually get a lot paler. It's gonna look pretty different from where it looks now. I think often we kind of rush the creaming the butter and sugar stage, but we don't wanna rush it. I mean, we can start on medium low and then after a couple of minutes, increase it to medium. You can kind of hear that slapping of the cream against the bowl. It's looking good. So we're at light and fluffy. Gonna add my eggs 1 at a time. And I want to make sure it's nice and incorporated before going to the next egg. Before I put this last egg in, I'm gonna scrape down the sides and the bottom of my bowl. Some stand mixers are very well calibrated. I could probably stand to get this recalibrated and then I wouldn't have to do this step. So now I'm gonna add my last egg. Oh, my batter looks really nice. This is my 4th final egg. I'm gonna add my aromatics. This is a combination of vanilla extract and almond extract. And I think the almond extract makes it even like a little wedding cakey in the flavor. So now we're gonna finish by adding our dry ingredients, alternating with our liquid, which is milk. I'm gonna add about 1/3 of my dry ingredients to the bowl. And I'm just gonna mix this on low until it comes together. And there's a reason why I asked my grandma to teach me how to make this cake before any other cakes. She made this cake for like every family crawfish boil, Mother's Day, Father's Day celebration. And it was the cake that people would like stampede into her kitchen, go straight to the cake stand and like not just take a piece, but wrap a piece up to take home with them. This was the cake that like people would fight over. And it's called the $1 million cake, and I think that's because it was always money. All right, I added about half of my liquid ingredient, this is my milk, and I'm just gonna let that go until it starts to come together. And the reason we're mixing on low here, at this step in making a cake batter, if you overmix it, you're gonna end up getting a cake that can be tough. So we don't want to overmix it here so we can still get that nice tender crumb that we expect from a cake. And if the mixture looks a little broken, it's a good time where you can scrape down the sides of the bowl, the bottom of the bowl, or just add a little bit more flour to bring it together, or just keep whipping it, it'll come together. I added 2/3 of my flour mixture. It's starting to look like a beautiful smooth cake batter. So I'm gonna add the rest of my liquid, and I'm gonna stop and scrape down the bottom and sides of my bowl. We're gonna end with the last of our dry ingredients. I mean, this is what we're looking for right there, that texture. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop it because with a cake batter, I'd rather underdo it on the mixing than overdo it because you can always finish by hand. Our cake batter looks great, so now we're just gonna pour it into our 3 cake pans. We want them all to have the same amount of batter in it, so we can have cake layers that are all the same size. I've got 8-inch cake pans. I like using 8-inch cake pans because your cake ends up being a little bit taller, which I think is a little bit more dramatic than 9-inch pans. But you can totally use 9-inch pans in this recipe. And because I don't like to do the whole dust with flour and butter and add parchment, I'm using baking spray. It's kind of like cooking spray, but it has flour already in it. So it makes getting your cake pans like super, super easy. Getting your cake pans together. And now I'm gonna put the batter in and then put them in the oven. And your oven should be preheated to 350 degrees. And if you want to be super precise, you can weigh your cake pans as you add batter to it, or you could even like measure with a volume measurement, but I'm eyeballing it, which is fine. Like once you've made a cake so many times, you can eyeball it, especially if you're using the same pans. I actually think if you're gonna make a recipe like a lot, you wanna really master it, use the same pans, use the same bowl for your ingredients, because you'll know automatically if something is off. This is a heavy mixing bowl. My arm needs a break. This bowl is heavy, woo. Often, what goes in the oven is what comes out of the oven. You want to make sure everything looks really nice before you put it in the oven. Like, yes, magic happens in the oven, but set magic up for success. Give it a head start. So I'm just kind of smoothing my batter into the cake pans. I've got my rack in the center of the oven, and I'll bake them until they are nice and golden brown. A cake tester in the center comes out clean, and if you like press it, it's kind of spongy and bounces back. I'm gonna check that in about 25 minutes. Halfway through, I'm gonna rotate them because the ones in the back are getting a different amount of heat in my oven than the ones in the front. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on my frosting for this cake. I'm doing a cream cheese frosting because that's what Granny did. So I've got a block of softened cream cheese, a stick of softened unsalted butter, powdered sugar, and vanilla extract. And I'm just gonna beat this with the paddle attachment until it's nice and smooth and creamy like frosting should be. Start on low because the powdered sugar is gonna fly. Just let it go for a little bit before increasing the speed. So we are whipping up a gorgeous spreadable frosting, but if you want your texture a little bit looser for your frosting, you can always add a spoonful of milk. All right, so our cake layers finished baking. Pulled them from the oven. I let them stay in their pans just for about 10 minutes, and then I removed them from their pans onto these cooling racks. So since they're still a little bit warm, it's the perfect time for them to soak up all of that good pineapple filling / like pineapple syrup that we made earlier. So So I'm just gonna kind of spread that pineapple filling right onto our still warm cake layers. And if your cake layers are a little uneven, you can always take a serrated knife and kind of even them. So we've got 2 of our cake layers have filling. The 3rd layer doesn't, because that's the layer that's going on top. So we can start assembling our cake. And now I'm gonna add another layer right on top. And lastly, I'm going to add our final layer, and I'm gonna flip it over so we have the flat side on top. So I'm just gonna start by putting frosting on top and then just work my way down the sides of the cake. I thought about putting some birthday candles on it because I don't know about you guys, but I always make my own birthday cakes. Okay, our cake is looking really delicious and kind of homey, and I cannot wait to try this. I want to see if I made Granny proud. The smell of the pineapple and that vanilla and almond, oh my gosh. This cake is so good. I know you're gonna love this cake, so I hope that you make it. Hit the subscribe button and come back because we've got a lot more baking to do, and I'll see you next time.